Hey everyone, thanks for joining me for another devlog for Dauphin, my 2D RPG about a marine biologist that I'm building with the Godot engine. Today is Thursday, November 2nd. I've just wrapped up work for the day here, and it's probably also fair to say I'm wrapping up one of my longer breaks from filming in quite a few months. Right after my last video, I took a lovely trip to Paris for the first time for a wedding. I've done some traveling for work in the meantime, and frankly, it's just been a busy end to the summer. Despite all that, I'm happy to say that even though I didn't film anything over the past month or so, it has been one of my most productive months somehow working on Dauphin. Nearly every day I've been able to make progress on some of the major features that I've had on my backlog, so naturally we have a lot to catch up on. And because I know I'm going to get a ton of comments about this mustache, this beauty was created for Halloween this year. Bonus points if you can in the comments identify who I was for Halloween based on this stash. As a hint, it was a couple's costume with my wife. Okay, let's go look at Dauphin. So where to begin? I think the best way to summarize what I've been working on over the past few weeks is to actually open up my field notes, go to my skills page, and open up the foraging skill, because this is where I've been pouring all my effort over the past month or so. Now I know this UI looks a bit goofy. I've been in here just messing around a lot, so I have some work to do. But what I do want to draw your attention to is the various unlocks here under the foraging skill. At level 1, we can harvest wood from palm trees with an axe. We can also mine copper ore from copper veins with a pickaxe. And as we continue to level up this skill, we can harvest different materials from different foraging nodes throughout the world. And the coolest thing about this is that these are not just placeholders for foraging. These are things you can actually now do in Dauphin, and that's what I'm super excited to show you. Rather than setting up a very nice tailored demo like I usually do, I'm going to show you how this system works and why it matters in Dauphin by actually playing the game. You can see that we are here on the beach. I have no pre-gathered materials here or in my inventory. It's like a fresh save. So we're just going to explore the beach and start to figure out how we can take part in some foraging activities. Right off the bat, we'll notice as we explore the island that there are some items sitting around on the sand. When we approach one, we see this interaction tooltip pop up with the icon for the foraging skill, letting us know that if we interact with this object, it's going to be related to our foraging skill in some way. So if we press the interact key next to this rock, we'll actually get foraging XP for breaking that loose, at which point we can actually pick up this stone and it'll go into the inventory. So this is almost kind of like a Valheim system where you interact with the object at first to kind of break it loose, you get some foraging XP, and then you can actually collect the item. So from those 3 items there on the beach, we've obtained 2 stones and 1 piece of driftwood. Spawning items like this into the world randomly is facilitated by my much improved entity spawner class, which is most easily visualized by this polygon collider that's all colorful along the outside of the island here. I updated this class to use a polygon collision shape instead of a square so I could be more precise with where I wanted to spawn certain items. For example, rocks and driftwood specifically around the shoreline here, and then I can spawn trash pretty much anywhere with a different entity spawner of a different shape. As we keep exploring, we'll also see some of that trash I was talking about. So this dark brown lump here, when I forage that, will actually turn into paper scrap, which once again goes into my inventory and will ultimately be used for crafting. Now the crafting skill, being so tightly coupled with foraging, is something that's also received a lot of love in the past month. Rather than initiating crafting from your item bar as you used to, you can now begin crafting from a crafting table, which I have right here conveniently next to my fisherman's hut. When we approach that, we see an interaction icon with the logo of the crafting skill, once again indicating to the player that interacting will involve the crafting skill in some way. Doing this will open up the crafting panel, which I've made a few nice changes to here. We now have tabs to indicate various types of items that you can craft, whether that's tools, wearable equipment, placeable camp objects, and something else I haven't figured out yet. And under our tools option here, we have a few recipes that are showing up because we have found the ingredients necessary to create them. So because we found driftwood and stone, we can create a stone axe. We can also use those same ingredients to create a stone pickaxe. Since we have the ingredients for our stone axe, we will start there. Go ahead and craft one of those. It will appear in our item bar from where we can swing it. And at this point, we might think we want to go swing this axe at a tree. We could certainly do that, but unfortunately with this particular tree, we're left with a message telling us that corruption prevents you from foraging here. This is a tie-in with the corruption system and the conservation skill. Basically, the way I have this set up right now is that you cannot forage resources from organisms that are afflicted by this corruption. So to fix that, we need to go grab my debug coral wand from up here next to the fisherman's hut, come back down here and remove that corruption. And at this point, once the tree is healthy, we're able to swing the axe at it. I think it's about 3 times for this guy, at which point he will drop a resource for us. You'll also notice that in comparison to other non-corrupted trees, after I've harvested a resource from this particular tree, it's lost its dark outline, kind of telling us that if we continue to chop this, we're not going to get any more resources from it. This is actually going to be on a timer such that these resources will respawn after a certain amount of time so that you can't just farm the same resource from the same node over and over again. In this case, you can see that we got some logs from this particular palm tree, and if we pick them up, they are in fact palm logs. This little guy here will present a slightly different challenge. If we try to forage from this plant with the axe, we'll be told that our foraging skill must be level 2 to forage from a sago palm tree. And in fact, if we go back into our skills tab, we will see that unlock here at level 2. Now I've gone ahead and crafted a pickaxe here to show you that this works pretty much the same way for mining nodes. We can approach a mining node like this, which is kind of this orangey brown color to denote that it's a copper ore. And we can hit this a few times with the pickaxe, at which point a copper ore will be removed, the rock will lose its color, and will be granted not only this item, but some more foraging XP. So that all might seem like a pretty simple demo, but there is something going on here that I'm very excited about. You remove corruption from the world, and those organisms give back to you by sharing their resources. Those resources are then used for crafting better gear and equipment to allow you to explore further, dive deeper, and remove stronger corruption from different types of organisms. The cycle repeats, and really what we have here is a very early glimpse at a basic gameplay loop. I say basic there because I want to flesh all this out so much more. Of course, not just adding more content to these individual skills, but creating more of these intra-skill interactions that reward the player for exploring all the different things you can do in the game. And with that said, with this devlog, I want to explore something that we haven't actually talked about even since the very early days of Dauphin's development, one of our most important skills in my opinion, which will be the climbing skill. The climbing skill will be not unlike the current diving skill in that it facilitates exploration. I love that the player can go into the ocean, dive pretty much anywhere they want, and find new organisms to save from corruption. I want that same vertical exploration to be possible on land, basically. I want the player to be able to climb up huge mountains on certain islands to find entirely different biomes and different types of creatures that present new challenges. We are coming in fresh together on this feature as I have not even set up a basic climbing state for the player yet. Since everything I just showed you, all I've had time to work on is a new tile set for some vertical exploration with a couple little vines here to hint that the player can climb. For now, I'm off to walk the dog and work on dinner, but I reckon tomorrow morning will be the start of building out a whole new dimension to our island scene. I'll see you then. Hey y'all, quick update here on Saturday evening. We have had to fast forward as unfortunately the last 2 days were pretty busy, but as you probably saw from some B-roll there, I have made some interesting progress in the morning, so let's take a quick look. The gist of it is, as you can probably tell from our scene preview here, that we have added a mountain, or at least a big blocky plateau, to our island. And if we zoom in here, you can see that on parts of this mountain or cliff face, we have some indicators that might hopefully look like climbing holds for the player to interact with. All I've really done here so far is just set up this tile set. I do have all my collisions nicely working, and I have a lack of collisions here so that I can actually just run up the wall and do a little bit of testing, make sure it looks nice up top. But now this is an entry point to create some type of interactable zone here when the player approaches a climbable area to initiate the climbing state. I actually have quite a few ideas for how I want to implement climbing, but frankly, after the long day I had today, I am just too tired to talk about them right now. I think either tomorrow morning or tomorrow afternoon, I'm going to jump into development and we'll come back and kind of talk about the plan once I have my few first steps taken. Hey y'all, welcome back to Wednesday morning before work. I had planned a quick check-in this morning with just a little bit of progress and an overview of my plan for climbing, but turns out over the past few mornings I have been able to make a ton of progress and I have a very basic demo to show you, so let's jump in. So here we are at the base of our cliff, and as we approach the wall, we'll see a new interaction prompt, this time holding the icon for the climbing skill. When we hit the interaction key, we'll see a few things happen all at once. The player will jump and grab hold of the wall. We will see the camera kind of zoom in on the action here, and we'll see this little kind of amber yellow circle appear further up, which is meant to indicate the next hold on this wall that the player is going to be moving towards. From this point, in the current state of my little prototype here, all you have to do to keep climbing is press the spacebar. Each time you press the spacebar, the player will jump towards the next hold in the sequence, all the way until they get towards the very top of this climbing route. Once they're there, they can resume control of the player character as normal, and the camera will zoom back out, and you will have succeeded in climbing that route. This is all facilitated through mainly two classes, the climbing route and its children climbing holds. Looking over here at my hierarchy, you can see that I have my climbing route, which is really everything you see here on the wall. It's this collider that roughly describes the path the player will be taking, as well as all the children holds along this route. In fact, if I expand the climbing route here, you can see that it has a child called holds that it expects to contain all the various holds describing the route. The code behind the climbing route class right now is actually fairly lean. We have helper functions to activate this route when the player initializes that interaction, progress the route, basically moving through one by one those child holds and activating those when appropriate, and then resetting the route when we get to the top. Most of the magic really happens within the player climb state, which the player enters when they first interact with that climbing route. We're looking at my player state machine right now just to show you that when we do request the climbing state, we are passing in that climbing route to the player's climb state so that it has all the information it needs to move the player between those holds. The player climb state itself looks like a complicated class with a lot of code, and I suppose it does have a lot of code, but it's really just all math to calculate that curved path that the player uses to jump between holds. The most important function is jump to hold, which uses the active hold from the climbing route, and that's what we're doing every time we press the space key. There's a few things I really like about this. For one, I think the animations turned out better than expected, both the zooming of the camera and the 2 frames I created for jumping left and right. And I also really like the feeling of being able to traverse this very quickly and really not impede the flow of the player's exploration, which is something I want to carry forward as I add more detail to the system. In terms of next steps, what I'll be focusing on is these targets that represent the next hold that the player will be jumping to. Apart from just making them look nicer, I need to introduce something apart from just tapping the space bar to jump. I'd ideally like to have some type of little timing check or other interesting minigame that the player can, 1, complete quickly so we don't impede that flow, but 2, have a meaningful result on the player's ability to successfully climb this particular route. That feels like some great functionality that could round out this devlog before the weekend, so I am going to go heads down and try to make some more progress over the next few days and hopefully catch up with one more very productive update towards the end of the week. Good morning, y'all. I'm joining you again here on Friday with some more great progress made on the climbing system. I have made a few decisions here that I'm still on the fence about and would love your feedback on, but we're in a great place to see one final demo to close out this devlog. So back at the base of our mountain here, we'll notice a few things are a bit different since the last update when we jump onto the wall. First off, the hold that we're jumping to is no longer that big green circle. Instead, it's just a highlighted version of one of the other holds that is already existing here on the wall. And of course, we now have the introduction of this crosshair that's kind of floating, going back and forth across this hold. The idea here is that the player will, instead of just pressing space to immediately jump, press space when this crosshair is over top of the next hold. Doing so will create kind of an accuracy check where we'll determine how close the crosshair was to the hold and present a message to the player indicating how good of a job they did actually performing that check. Where I'd love some feedback from y'all is how I reward the player or conversely punish them for a good or bad accuracy check on these holds. In the current state, right now I have this affecting the XP that the player is rewarded for traversing this climbing route. So if I land this right on the money, I'll be granted the full 2 XP that one of these holds provides when you jump to grab it. If I do a very poor job and miss it completely, I won't get any XP for moving to that hold. I will also clarify that in the current state, no matter how well or poorly you do on those individual holds on the way up, once you make it to the top, you are rewarded a big chunk of climbing XP that is not at all related to those individual accuracy checks. The other pretty clear possibility I see here is to instead have success with these accuracy checks determine whether or not the player can actually make it to the top of this climbing route, meaning that if we had a particularly poor check on a certain hold, it could detract from the player's stamina over here up next to their watch. If that stamina made it all the way to 0 before they made it to the top of the route, the player could fail the route and be reset back to the bottom. My big hangup with this is that climbing routes already have a climbing level requirement to begin based on their grade, and having the player be able to fail them even if they meet that level requirement seems like it would be just more annoying than actually contributing to gameplay in any meaningful way, but again, I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. With all that said, I am thrilled with how much progress I made this week, given that I started with pretty much just the tile set at the beginning of this devlog. Having the ability for the player to explore vertically in Dauphin will now allow me to create entirely new biomes containing new organisms and content, which is super exciting. As always, I want to give a huge shout out to the folks who support this channel and Dauphin's development on Patreon. Grommy supporters this month are Deluse, Jess Sargo, Samuel SVD, and Mega Ombre. If you are a Cherry supporter or above on Patreon, you'll be able to go in after I post this video and see some of the code associated with this system. And specifically, I'll probably share my player climb state, which will have some of that math for how I move the player between those holds. Thank you so much for watching. Hope you enjoyed this video, and I'm looking forward to sharing more progress with you as we enter this holiday season. I'll see you soon.